Hello? Is that working?
Can you tap it? Okay, yeah, it's
Hello?
working.
Does that work? Is this better? Alright, cool. Alright, let's begin lecture. Today we're going to be talking about table views. Some logistical stuff. Again, if you're asking for extensions, please do so 24 hours before the deadline. We've been lenient because we know they're like prelims, but like in the future, try to ask beforehand. And also, if you want to request extensions or have any questions, post everything on Piazza. Don't email us because if you send it to the email, everyone on the team will see your email. You probably don't want that. Yeah. So before we move on, we're gonna go over some awesome submissions from Project 2. Let me pull up my thing. I just need to get the simulator out.
Oh.
I installed it. One sec. How do I change the color?
Preferences. So command comma.
Fonts and colors.
Then do presentation light.
Presentation light. Okay. So the first person is Michael. Michael is here. So we have our grocery item quantities. Like we can do hello, and like 3. We can add it. If we wanted to remove it, we can also just click hello and click remove. Let's say we added like a ton and like 1, and then like B and 2. We can also reverse like the order that we displayed it in, so that's pretty cool. And this is just a segmenting control. So great job implementing the challenge problem. Next person is Jeremy. Jeremy is right here. Again, I think he implemented the 2 same challenge problems. So we do like AAA, BBB, or AA1. Oh yeah, there's a lock, so we need to unlock that in order to add items. And then we do BBB and 2. What? Okay. So you have that. Oh, that's interesting. And then you have ascending and descending. So again, very nice job. Looks very nice as well. Next is. Is she here? How do you pronounce your name?
It's Anomaly.
Anomaly? Is that okay?
Yeah.
Alright, Anomaly. Anomaly's project is right here. Again, I think they implemented the same challenge problems. It's like, you know the idea, like AA1, add item, AAA, remove item, and then this same thing as the other 2. And then we can like sort and by ascending or descending. Next is Young Kim. Right here. So chicken nuggets, or you can change it to A. And then you also have this like sort by ascending or descending, and then you have this lock. Very nice. And then last is Evan. Evan is. Alright, I'm trying to close this. Evan is right here. And yes, this one is kind of special actually because they did this search feature. So we do like hello and 2. The layout's kind of off, but let's say we did like B and 3, and then we search for hello. It shows hello. So now we are searching. That's very cool. And then we also have this alphabetical, reverse alphabetical or quantity. Oh, you can also clear the search, and then you can sort by alphabetical, reverse, or quantity. So very cool, very nice. Cool. Let me close all of this. Alright, it's kind of hard to close. Alright, we're not closing it? Okay. Cool. Now let's do some review. If you have Polo, please open it on your phone. On TestFlight, don't use the one from the App Store. The one from TestFlight. This is the code. Does anyone need the code? All right. First question: how do we push? Here's the code.
Oh, not 0.
V03TFI. Everyone in? 3 seconds. 1, 2, 3. So first question is, how do we push/present a view controller?
Can everyone see the question?
Can everyone see the question?
No. What? Okay, let me try this again.
1 second. Maybe try exiting the group
Oh, really?
and then come back in. Yeah.
Oh, didn't even.
You guys see it?
Yeah, I see it. Okay.
I think you disconnected from the
Oh.
socket. Five more seconds. Okay. Does anyone want to tell me the answer? Did you raise your hand?
Me?
Yeah, sure, you.
Sure, B.
B, yeah. Do you want to explain it real quick?
Well, one of them you're using a navigation controller, obviously.
Yeah.
And the other one you're presenting modally.
Yeah, exactly. So when you push view controllers, what that does is it pushes a view controller onto the navigation stack, which is why you need to say navigation controller that push view controller. But when you present a view controller, all that does is it presents it modally on top of the current one. So you can just do self.present. So it's B. Any questions? Number 2, why do we use delegation? Do you guys see the poll?
No? Do you not see it?
No, they see it. They see it.
Oh. Why do I? Oh.
All right, 3 more seconds. Okay, does anyone want to tell me the answer? You again?
Sure, I mean, I'll go for it.
Awesome. Yeah.
C.
Yeah, C, you want to explain a bit?
Sure. Yeah, I mean, so specifically, I guess, like, when you're trying to change something in, like, view controller A, you delegate that. You make that the delegate of another view controller.
Mm-hmm.
From that other view controller,
Mm.
you do whatever that changes the first view controller.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not gonna go into specifics, but like essentially, like what you guys did in your homework, if we have vController A and vController B, where we push vController B from vController A, and we want to pass information back from B to A, what we can do is create a protocol and use delegation to pass the information back. So like what you did in your homework was you probably had a protocol called like change title delegate or whatever, and then whenever you click on the save, you would update the button in vController A to reflect the text that you inputted. Does that make sense? Cool, so the answer is C. So now we can start talking about today's topic. Today we're going to be talking about UI table views. Where are UI table views? UI table views are just views that you use to display a list of information. A scrollable list of information. So you've probably seen it everywhere actually, because every app probably has one. So one example is your settings app. If you go into your settings, this whole thing is actually a table view, and we know it is because it's scrollable, and every column is like everything is broken down to rows, so it's like a list of information. Another example is Spotify. So like Spotify or Apple Music, whenever you go to your playlist, you'll see a list of all the songs in your playlist. That's just a table view. So what is a table view made of? Table views are broken down into sections, and each section is broken down. I'm sorry, Young is doing something stupid. Each section is broken down to rows. Each row themselves has a corresponding UITableView which is just a view that to display for the cell. Some examples in settings. So for settings, we have this table view, and we have 3 different sections. You know they're different sections because they're separated by this like white space. The first section is section 0 because it's index 0. Second section is section 1. Third section is section 2. And then each section themselves have rows. So section 0 has 2 rows, row 0, row 1. Section 1 has 1 row, so it's just row 0, and so on. And then same thing for Spotify. Spotify only has 1 section because it's just like all your songs. And this section has like 9 rows. Any questions? Cool. So now we know what a table view is. What steps go into creating one, right? The first thing you need to do is whichever view controller that you want to add a table view to, you have to conform that view controller to 2 protocols: UITableView Datasource and UITableView Delegate. So these are just 2 protocols, which is like sort of like an interface. So what is UITableView Datasource? UITableView Datasource just provides your table view with the information that it needs to construct itself. So specifically, there are like 2 required methods. The first one tells your table view how many rows should be in each section, and the second method tells your table view which table view cell object to display at each row. The number of sections method is optional because the default number of sections is just 1. So if you just have 1 section, you don't have to implement that method. So the number of rows in section method is called number of rows in section, and the cell object to display at each row method is called cell for row at. And then number of sections is just called number of sections. This is just sort of like a high level overview of what each one does. You'll see it in practice in the demo. Any question? Any questions about that? Cool. Now, what is UITableView Delegate? This protocol consists of all like optional methods, so it's not like if you conform to it, you won't be forced to implement any methods. But what it does is it sort of provides your table view with some extra information. So this includes like how high each row should be in terms of pixels, and what should happen if each cell is selected or deselected. You'll notice that we don't have a function that controls like how wide each row should be, because by default, every row will just have the same width as your table view. So we can only configure the height. And then the corresponding methods are height for row at and did select row at and did deselect row at. Height for row at is optional, but you should implement it because if not, they'll just use the default table view height, table view cell height, which I believe is like 30 or something. But in most cases, you want to customize that to be whatever you want. Any questions about that? So that's the 2 protocols. Next, there's this concept of registering cells. So whenever we create table views, we have to create custom UITableViewcell classes. The reason we need to do this is like, for example, for this Spotify table view, each cell has like an image view, which is like the image of the song, and then 2 labels, right? In order to create that cell, we have to actually create a like Spotify song cell, and then inside create 2 labels and create an image view. In order to use our custom cells inside our table view, we have to just do this thing called registering it. And the way you do that is by doing tableview.register ... You'll see this later on in the demo. This is just like a explanation of the concept. Next concept is reusing cells. So imagine our playlist had like 2,000 songs, right? If we had to make a cell for every single song, then we would have to create 2,000 cells. But that's bad because that takes up a lot of memory, which makes our app very slow, which is bad. So what Apple does is they made table views have this like notion of reusing cells. And what that means is we only have to create the number of cells that we see at any given moment. So anytime the cell at the very bottom goes off the screen, that cell will be reused to display the cell that shows up at the top. Does that make sense? So like, let's say for this Spotify playlist, if On My Mind goes off the screen, that cell will be used to display whatever song is at the very top. So this way we only need to have like 9 instances of UITableView cells instead of 2,000. Cool? So that's reusing cells. How does reusing cells actually get implemented? The way we do that is by using this method called DQReusableCell. So instead of doing like let cell equals UITableViewcell every time to get an instance of the cell, what you can do is call this DQReusableCell method, and that will return an instance of a reused UITableViewcell. Good. I can explain that again if that was kind of confusing, because this is pretty important. All right. So just like some high-level basic steps. First, you want to initialize and lay out your table view, just like you do with all your other views. Next, you want to create your custom Tableview cell class, and then register that cell class to your table view. And then lastly, you want to conform your view controller to the two protocols. Cool. So this is going to be what the app that we're going to be building in our demo today. It's sort of like a very basic version of Eatery. So we have like a navigation bar whose title is Cafeterias, and then the whole app is taken up by a table view where each row has two labels displaying the name and rating of the cafeteria. And then we want the functionality to be that if we tap on it, then this heart image shows up, and then if we tap on it again, it disappears. Does that make sense? Cool. So now let's move on to the demo. I posted the starter code on Piazza. So what you want to do is just go to the Piazza post, click on lecture for a starter, and then just open that. So in the starter code, I've already set up app delegate and some code in view controller. So if we just run it right now, we'll see what we have. So you see, we'll just have a empty screen with the navigation bar. Does anyone have this? All right. So first thing we're gonna want to do is create some representation of the cafeteria. So in that case, like remember MVC, the cafeteria is just a model. It represents a data object, right? So to create that class, let's create a new file. So you're going to want to go new file, and then this time just click on Swift file, and then let's call it cafeteria. And then what you want to do is go back to Piazza. If you see towards the bottom, it says part 1 cafeteria, and then there's like an enum. You want to copy that and paste it into this cafeteria file. This cafeteria rating is just an enum that represents the different types of ratings we have. So either terrible, bad, moderate, good, or great. And now we can make a class to represent a cafeteria. So to do that, we want to do class cafeteria and then open brace, close brace. So what does a cafeteria have, right? So a cafeteria has a name, which is of type string. So we can declare a variable called name of type string. Every cafeteria has a rating of type cafeteria rating. So we can do var rating equals is of type cafeteria rating. And then we also need to have some notion of whether or not we favorited this cafeteria. So we can make a variable called isFavorite and just make that a Boolean. Cool. Now you'll see that Xcode is complaining because we haven't provided any initializers yet. So we can just create one. So to create an initializer, you just type init, and then you want to click on the first one. And then here we can specify the parameters that we want. So we're going to have to pass in a name of type string, a rating of type cafeteria rating, and isFavorite of type Boolean. And then inside the init, all we have to do is set the actual fields to be whatever we pass in. So self.name equals name, self.rating equals rating, and self.isFavorite equals isFavorite. And something else we can do is, because we know all cafeterias at the beginning are all not favorited, what we can do is provide the default value for isFavorite to be false. so that whenever we create a cafeteria, we don't have to specify its favorite. Is everyone caught up? Cool. So now let's go back into our view controller file, and let's start creating some cafeterias. So before we do that, let's actually create a variable called cafeterias, and this is just going to be an array of cafeterias. So we're going to be creating some list of cafeterias and then setting it equal to this cafeteria's variable. So inside load, let's just create some cafeteria. So let's say appel. We can do let appel equals cafeteria, and then name is going to be appel, and rating is moderate. And then we can make one for RPCC. Name is RPCC, and rating is great. We have good brunch. Next is Risley. Cafeteria. Name is going to be Risley, and rating is going to be bad because I've never been there. Next is Becker. Cafeteria. Name is going to be Becker, and rating is going to be great because it's on West. And then last is Cook. Cafeteria. Name is Cook, and rating is good. So now that we've created our cafeteria objects, we can then set our cafeteria's variable to just be an array of all these cafeterias. So appel, RPCC, Risley, Becker, and Cook. Cool. So now that we've set up all our model objects, we can start creating our table view. You'll see that I already declared a variable for a table view at the top. So what we can do is just initialize it by doing Tableview equals UITableView, open parentheses, close parentheses. And then Tableview dot translates all resizing mass equals false. We need to add this line so that our constraint code actually works. And then let's also just add it as a subview to our root view. And then if you go into sub constraints, you can uncomment the constraint code by doing command / and then control I will indent it nicely for you. So now let's try running that and see what we see. So you'll see right now we have a table view. It's like empty, but like it takes up the size of the whole screen. That's what we want. So next thing we're gonna want to do is conform our view controller to the two protocols. So the first one is gonna be UITableView Datasource. So what you want to do is go to the very bottom, do extension view controller, and then conform this to UITableView Datasource. And then you'll see that Xcode is complaining because we haven't implemented the two required methods of the data source protocol. So we can just implement those and then it'll stop complaining. So the first method, which tells our table view how many rows should be in each section, is just called number of rows in section. So if you just type in number of rows, you should see that method pop up. And then click enter. And then the other method, which tells our table view what cell to display at each row, is called cell for row at. So if you type cell for row, you should see it pop up as well. Okay, so inside this number of rows in section, you can see that this method expects us to return an int. Does anyone want to tell me how many rows we should have in this section? Or what should I return here? Yeah. 5, that is correct. But let's say we didn't know how many cafeterias we had in our array.
Then the length of the array.
Yeah, exactly. We just want to return the length of the cafeterias array. This is a lot better than doing returning like 5 or 6, because anytime we add an extra cafeteria into our cafeterias array, it'll like reflect that in the table view. Cool. And then inside cell for row at, for now, let's just return a UITableViewcell. And then let's actually also print something. So you'll see in cell for at, we have this index path argument. And what this is it essentially tells us what section and what row we're currently displaying. So let's add some print statements. So let's do section colon. To get the section, you do index path dot section, and then to get the row, it's index path dot row. And then before we run this, we have to do one more thing. So we know right now that our view controller conforms to this data source protocol, but we need to tell our table view that our view controller does that. So to do that, you want to do Tableview.Datasource, and this is essentially a field that you set to be the object that conforms to this data source protocol, which in this case is just a view controller. So you want to do self. By doing this, you're sort of telling the table view to say like, hey, look at my view controller and look for these two methods, and then it'll call these two. Now let's try running that. You'll see we get a couple of print statements. So right now you can see that our cell for at method gets called 5 times, which is expected because we have 5 cafeterias. For the first cell, it's telling us that it's in the section at index 0 at row 0, which just means first section, first row. And then second time it's being called for the cell at section 0, row 1, and then third time in section 0, row 2, and so on. So that's just something nice to visualize. So essentially, cell for at gets called however many times, however many rows you have. So we have 6 rows. Cell for at will be called 6 times. Cool. Next, what we want to do is, so like you see right now, our cells are just empty, but we want our cells to actually contain some labels and image views. So what we want to do is create a new custom UITableViewcell class. So to do that, you want to do new file, and then Cocoa Touch class. And then for subclass of, you want to do UITableViewcell. And let's call it Cafeteria TableViewcell. Click next, and then create. And then you'll see that we have 2 functions here. You can just delete it. We won't need it. And then let's go back to Piazza. And then you'll see part 2 Cafeteria TableViewcell. You want to copy in snippet 1. This just defines the this just declares the views that we'll have in the cell and some constants. And then in order for us to actually add these labels and views to our cell, we have to override the init method. So if you type in init, you'll see this init style reuse identifier method. Click enter. And then remember, anytime you override a function, you have to call the super of that function. So we want to do super.init, and then just pass in the style and reuse identifier. And then also you'll see that we're getting a complaint from Xcode saying that we need to add this method. This method is something that you have to add anytime you override the init method of a class. You don't have to worry about what it does, but just click on fix, and then it'll add it for you. You can just ignore it, but just know that it has to be there. And then go back to Piazza, and then there's snippet 2. You want to copy that and paste that into the init. Then let's also copy snippet 3. Snippet 3 is 2 separate functions. So you want to copy that and paste it outside of the init. Cool. So you'll see it right now in our init. We initialize our views, set the translating also auto resizing mask to false, and like configure it. But there's like one step that we're missing for each of these. Does anyone want to tell me what that is? Yeah.
Adding it to the subview.
Yeah. So we want to add it as a subview to our cell. So does anyone want to guess how they would do that? We can't do view that add subview because for view controllers the view referred to the root controllers to the view controller's root view, but inside UITableView cells we don't have a root view. UITableView cells themselves are actually a UI view. If you go here, you'll see that UITableView cell is a subclass of UI view. So UITableView cell is itself a view itself, or it's a view itself. So what you might think of doing is just doing add subview, and then do like name label, right? So remember, add subview is a method that belongs to UI views, and because UITableViewcell is a subclass of UI view, we can just do add subview. But you should actually not do this. The reason for that is because Apple provided this thing to us called content view, and this content view is something that all UITableView cells have. And Apple tells us that anytime we want to add any subviews to a cell, you should add it to the content view instead of adding it directly to the cell. So what we want to do is do content view that add subview, name label, and then do the same thing for the other two. So content view that add subview, rating label, and then content view that add subview, heart image view. Cool. Is everyone caught up? Alright, now let's go back to our view controller. So now we've created a custom UITableView class. If you remember from the slides, the next step we have to take is registering it to our table view. And the way we do that is by doing tableview.register. And you want to take the first one, register cell class for cell reuse identifier. For cell class, there's just you just have to pass in the class, the custom tableview cell class itself. So that's just cafeteria tableview cell, and then you want to do .self. If you do .self in front of a class name, that just passes in like the actual class. And then for the cell reuse identifier, it can be any random string. Right now I defined a reuse identifier at the top called cafeteria cell reuse, so you can just use that. But like it could be really anything. Like I could call this like Kevin or something. It doesn't matter. But something to keep in mind is if we were registering multiple different cells, each of them should have a different identifier, right? Because IDs are unique. Every cell reuse identifier should be unique. Cool. Now let's go back into our cell for row@. Now instead of just returning a UITableView cell, let's actually return a cafeteria tableview cell. So to do that, we first need to get an instance of our cafeteria tableview cell. And what you might think we should do is like just create an instance of cafeteria tableview cell, but that's bad because if we did this, then we would just be creating a cell for every single row. That leads to the problem that I discussed before about like the songs in the playlist. You want to create 2,000 cells for 2,000 songs. Instead, what you want to do is to dequeue a cell, and the way you do that is by doing tableview.dequeue, and then you want to take in the second one. So dequeue reusable cell with identifier for index path. So for the identifier, you have to pass in the identifier that you registered the cell with. So in this case, we registered our custom cell with this reuse identifier. So we have to pass in the same reuse identifier here. And then for index path, you can just pass in index path. And then now let's return cell. So now we're not returning UITableView cell anymore. We're returning a cafeteria tableview cell. And then let's try running that again. And you'll see right now it's still empty. Does anyone want to guess why? The hint is if you go into Tableview just like look at our labels. Anyone want to take a guess? Yeah.
They don't have any text.
Yeah, they don't have any text, right? So our labels are there, but we don't have any text right now, so it's like just empty. So what we want to do is create a function inside our cell that takes in the cafeteria object to display for the cell, and then sets the text for the two labels. So what we can do is make a function called like configure, and this is gonna configure. This function is gonna take in the cafeteria object of type cafeteria, and this cafeteria object just represents the cafeteria object corresponding to the cell. So like for the first cell it should be Appel, for second it should be RBCC, for third it should be Risley, Becker, and then Cook. And then once we have this cafeteria object, we can just set the name labels text to be the cafeteria's name. And then we can also set the rating labels text to be the rating of the cafeteria. So it's just you'll see inside our screenshot it says rating colon and then the rating. So what we want to do is do rating colon and then pass in the rating. If we were to just do cafeteria.rating, the text would be something like rating colon moderate, but the m would be lowercase because our enum right here is all lowercase. So instead what we should do is pass in the rating into this helper function, and this just takes in the rating and returns a string. So we can call the helper function, get string from rating, and then pass in the rating. Does that make sense? Cool, so now we have this configure function, but we haven't called it. So let's call it inside our view controller file. So now we have the cell. If we try to do cell.configure, you'll see that it doesn't show up. And the reason is because DQ reusable cell returns a UITableViewcell object, which you can see right there. And this configure function is something that we wrote that belongs only to Cafeteria TableViewcell. So in order to actually get access to the configure function, we have to force cast this to be Cafeteria TableViewcell. And now if we do cell.configure, it will show up. So now we need to actually get the cafeteria object. Does anyone want to guess how we get the cafeteria object for this index path? So remember when we ran this, our print statements showed us that this self-route method was called for section 0, row 0, section 0, row 1, 2, 3, and 4. For the cell at section 0, row 0, we just want to display the cafeteria corresponding to Appel, right? And Appel is the first index of our cafeterias array. And then similarly, the cell at index 1 is just RBCC, which is just the cafeteria at index 1 of our cafeterias array. So to get the corresponding cafeteria object, all you need to do is let's comment this out for now. All you need to do is let cafeteria equals cafeterias at this current row. So when we're returning the cell at row 0, we'll get the cafeteria at index 0, which is Appel. And then now we can call the configure function and then pass in cafeteria. And then let's actually add an additional print statement just to show you guys. So let's print that and then print the cafeteria name and then run that. So you'll see now our labels actually get set, And if we look at our print statements, the cafeteria at row 0 is Appel, at row 1 is RPCC, at row 2 is Risley, at row 3 is Becker, and at row 4 is Cook. So now, for every different cell, we have the correct text. Any questions? Cool, so now we're done with the data source protocol. Next, we want to conform our vController to the UITableView delegate protocol. So we want to do extension vController UITableView delegate. And then we can implement 3 methods. So the first one is height for row at. And this just tells the table view how high each row should be. The second one is did select row at. And this tells the table view what should happen when we select a row. And the last one is did deselect row at. So for height for row at, all we have to do is return some float. So we're going to return like, how much did I put? Oh, actually define a variable at the top called cell height. So let's just use that. So return cell height. And then inside did select row at and did deselect row at, let's just add a print statement. So it's print selected and print deselected. And then we can run that. So now let's say we tap on the Appel. Oh, we forgot to do one thing. So we conformed our vController to this protocol, this delegate protocol, but we didn't tell our table view that we actually did that. So the way we do that is by setting the table view's delegate field, sort of similar to how we set the data source field, and we can just set that equal to self. So now if we run that, it should work now. So now we tap on the Appel, you'll see it says selected. Does anyone want to guess what will get printed if I tap on the Appel again? Anyone want to guess? 50-50 chance. Elena, you want to guess? Young, do you want to guess? You selected? Well, let's see. No, it says selected again. So why is that? So the name is actually pretty confusing. So what deselected refers to isn't like when we tap on a cell after we select it. Deselect refers to when we tap on the cell and then tap on a different cell. So if we tap on the Appel is selected, and then let's say we tap on RPCC. Now Appel will get deselected and RPCC will get selected. So don't think that this deselect is like if you just tap on it multiple times. I just want to demonstrate the concept. We won't actually be using did deselect for this demo, so you can just comment that out. Okay, so now inside did select row at, what we want to do is every time we select on a cell, we want to toggle this heart image view, right? So to do that, let's go inside our TableViewcell function, TableViewcell class, and add a function called toggle heart. And then for some boolean called isFavorite. So if isFavorite is true, we want to display the heart image view. If it's not, we want to hide it. So the way we can do that is just by doing heart image view dot is hidden is equal to the opposite of isFavorite. So if isFavorite is true, it should be hidden. Or if his favorite is true, then is hidden should be false, and then vice versa. Cool. So now we've created the function. We can call it now inside our vController. So first thing we need to do is get a reference to the current cell at this index path. So like if we tap on the second row, we need to get the cell at the second row, right? The way we do that is by doing let cell equals TableView dot cell for row at. And then you just pass in the index path. So we select the cell at row 2. The did select row at function will get called with index path of row 2, and then here this allows us to get the cell at row 2. And then again, like before, we can force cast this to be Cafeteria Tableview cell. Next thing we want to do is get the corresponding Cafeteria object for this index path. And the way we do that is just like before. You can do cafeterias, let cafeteria equals cafeterias at this row. So if we select on this row, we want to sort of like swap the value of its favorite. So if its favorite is false, we want to change it to true, and if it's true, we want to set it to false. So the way we can do that is by doing cafeteria.isFavorite. What we could do is set it equal to like the opposite of cafeteria.isFavorite. But there's actually a better way to do that. Swift or Apple added this new function called toggle, and it just toggles the Boolean variable's value. So if it's true, it'll become false, and if it's false, it'll become true. And then last thing we need to do is just call this toggle heart function. And for the Boolean, we can just pass in the cafeteria.isFavorite. Any questions? Now let's try running that. And then if we tap on Appel, you'll see the image shows up. If we tap on it again, it disappears. Tap on RBCC, it shows up. Becker shows up. Cook. So everything works. The last thing we want to do is, you'll see that right now, if we tap on it, there's this like ugly gray thing over the cell. To get rid of that, you just want to go into your cell for row at, and right before we return, set the cell selection style to be none. And then if we run that, that gray thing should stop appearing. Cool. Does anyone have any questions about any of that? I can explain any part if you want. Cool, so I guess I'll just go over the methods again real quick. Number of rows in section just tells your table view how many rows should be in each section. Cell for at tells your table view what cell object to display at this current row. High for at tells your table view how high each row should be. And then did select and did deselect gets called when you select or deselect a row. Cool. That's the end of the demo. Last thing is just there's a project again due this Sunday at 11:59 p.m. Again, if you want to request an extension, please do so 24 hours before the deadline. Yeah, cool. That's it. Thank you for coming.